Hi and welcome back to MDriven. In this session I will describe how we can integrate with GraphAPI and the Office 365 solution, both to do authentication and access Sharepoint search and access the documents to open them, to identify them by their DriveId, which will stay the same even if it's moved around in the SharePoint site. And starting with the end in mind, I thought that I should show you the result first. So I'm gonna use OpenID authentication with this button, and there's some configuration that I will show you how that was done. Now it looks up my user and the organization that I was registered with, and I have a simple UI built up here that sort of lets me search things. I'm going to search for my own name to see if I'm mentioned in this SharePoint site in any way, and I can see that there are several documents coming up, and we keep this in a class called sysGraphAPI result row, and this is basically just a transient class to hold the results from the search and some of the other operations that I've put here on the demo screen. If I went to the model, I could see that what we did was to from the sys user, which is the logged in user, have a sysGraphAPI class with a couple of new methods, and these methods are all used by the sample UI to make it easy for you to just merge this in and try the functions out. Anyway, let's go back to where we were, if I've lost it. Yeah, maybe I lost it. So going back, search the GraphAPI for my own name. If I now were to try to open one of these documents, I can see that the link shows up down here. Seems fair enough. I will press Ctrl to open it in a new tab. Yeah, and that was apparently a folder. That's good. And if I were to add some actions on this row to make use of the functions that are available on one of these rows, namely navigate down in folder or navigate up in folder. So if we are a folder, we are expected to be able to navigate up, and apparently this was a folder, so if I navigate up in that folder, REST request is sent to over the GraphAPI, and we get some new documents or folders. And yeah, this is a folder apparently, and there are names, and these are the keys that uniquely identify a document together with the version number of the document. So the drive is sort of maps to a SharePoint site, but be aware you can also happen to index and get hits on your OneDrive, because that's the same logic in GraphAPI. So this is basically the site, and this is the item identity within this site. And what I did to be able to search this easier is, I would see my own. If I search on myself again and take maybe this document, select that one. If I were to open that, it opens up in SharePoint. That's fair. And that wasn't, apparently SharePoint wasn't logged in, and that's because this PC that I'm on now is not logged in with this organization. It's only the web browser. So I could do that if I wanted, but I rather not at this point. So I'm gonna just skip that, and instead go to here and set fields. What that does is just take these numbers and populate these fields up here, and that makes it possible for me to test the other functions to look up from Drive and DriveId directly like that. And if I have this item, I can actually access the thumbnail URL of that item, and I will do that now and hope to see that it populates. Yeah, maybe this was the thumbnail wasn't much to brag about. It was just a white screen with some text on it. So let's look up something else. It might be let's take this one, and this UI is a bit clunky, but it's just made to show you the different operations. So I'm gonna look up the thumbnail for that one. Yeah, so there's not much in these documents as it comes to thumbnail information, but search and looking up from a specific URL, and this is important, of course, if you are on a SharePoint site and you from there want to look up what the numbers are. So let's try that way. Here I am on a SharePoint site, and if I were to go to this document and copy the link and allow it to use the clipboard, then I have the link in the clipbook, and then I could paste that in here and do lookup from URL, and then I get access to that particular document's DriveId and ItemId, and also the version number. And this is cool because I can actually set the fields, and then I have the version number free. But what if the use case stipulates that I should use the version 1, or if I need to see version 1? Then I could go like this and look that up. From, yeah, maybe that wasn't the version 1. I'm gonna look for version 2. Yeah, actually maybe there is no access from the UI that I made. Let's see what this actually does. The UI lookup from UI. Yeah, it takes the version as well. So how come it doesn't show? I can check history on this one. Version history. Yeah, it really should be accessible, but maybe I don't have the right credentials or the access rights. And this is one of the good things, that even if we have access to search and everything over GraphAPI, we still need to have the access or the access rights are respected. So no search, no things will be returned if I'm not supposed to see them. And that could be what happens in this case then. No, actually this is a problem with the UI, because I can see down here in this link that it ends up with versions /1.0/content. So if I were to open this document, it would be the number 1 version of that document instead. So then I can open that file and what that contains. Good. So search lookup from a URL is when you have a URL and you want to get the numbers, and this is when you have the numbers and possibly the version and you want to go the other way around and get the URL. And then you have the ad hoc question, which makes it possible to formulate your own JSON request and just push it, and the thumbnail. So the general idea for this is that you're going to use these classes, and whenever you have results from search or from paste or lookup of a certain URL or something, whenever you have that, you can create your own class and object and just keeping the item ID and the DriveId. And from that you can at any point reach the document that's associated with those numbers. And also you can reach the thumbnail to that document at this point in time. So to make this happen, we need to authenticate with the OpenID Connect to the Azure site, and we also need to have access rights for our application registration. And what we will do behind the scenes, so to speak, is keep these sys tokens with an access token and a refresh token. So when the access token usually just lasts for, I think the default for an Azure account or a Azure AD is 60 minutes, but it could be put down to only 15 minutes. So we also store this refresh token, and whenever we notice that this refresh token is older than a time that we have given in this method, and you can change this if it's not to your liking, it's returning 50 now, so 50 minutes from we are getting the access token, we keep it, and then we use the refresh token to ask for a new one. And if the refresh token has fallen out of scope as well, and this could happen if we wait for a year or something like that, or if the user has said that he's lost access to his password, or otherwise is Azure discovers suspicious activity, then the refresh token is probably pulled, and then the user would need to log off and log on again to get a new refresh token, and that we will store that. And we will store this in the database encrypted, so that it wouldn't be too easy to, once you get access to a database and you see all the users and see all their tokens, and the access tokens are fairly fastly old, so that's not too dangerous, but the refresh token is kept for a longer time, so it's important that we can encrypt these. What do I need to do on Azure? Well, let's go to Azure and see. I need to log in as a fairly trusted individual in the organization's tenant, and now I'm logged in as a person in this tenant, and I can go to app registrations. So each app that are going to use services have their own app registration preferably, and that app has a name and some unique settings on them. So I can see on all applications, and I know that my application is this one, so I'm gonna go into that one, and I can see that it's called Rock, and that it has client credentials, one secret, that's important. It has redirect URIs, and what are those? Well, we can check. They are all the addresses that the Azure thinks will be okay to return to. So whenever we do development on a local turnkey server, we have this address for that, so that's good that we can get back to that. And when we're doing development on a server with the HTTPS, using this, and then we have all the other test sites and the production sites and things like that. So it's no issue to add as many as you need here. Just push this button and enter a new unique URL that's fairly correct towards where you want to go once the Azure AD returns the keys. So that's for what we need for the redirect URI, and here I've also checked that we should get access tokens and we should get ID tokens. This one says that it's just the account for this organization and no other accounts that should be allowed, and that's fairly standard. And haven't done anything more on this page. What we then need to do is to get API permissions. So what are API permissions? This refers to the GraphAPI. So it looks like this, and we can pretty much ask for new permissions by add permission, and then we see all the available entry points that we could possibly add. We have one here called Sharepoint. We should not use that one because that's the old one. Actually, all the access to Sharepoint things is done over Microsoft Graph instead. So this is the main one that we want to focus on. Of course, we can do the other things as well if we need to, but this is the main one. Once we are here, we should ask for, in this case anyway, a delegated permission. What's a delegated permission? It's when we act as the user. So we are in all essential circumstances acting as the user that has logged in. An application permission is something completely different. Then we give access to our application, and that application could browse SharePoint as itself. And maybe it has extreme high access rights and could see all the information, or maybe it doesn't have any access rights and could see none of the information. So this is complex and not necessarily what you want. You want to act as the logged in user so that, for example, search only return the documents that this user has access to. And why do we need a delegated permission to act as a user? Well, the user is interacting with the browser, and the browser is not really sending all these GraphAPI calls. It's us on the server that do it. And that's the preferred way to not expose this to the client side. It's all done on the server. So when we want delegated permissions, we have all kinds of types of permissions, and we need to find the ones that are good for us. In our case, it's these ones that I've already picked. So on the Azure Active Directory, I want user read, and what that does for me is that I can read the user's name and properties. So that's just pure hygiene, and it wouldn't make sense to disallow anyone to read the logged in user's name. So that's the ability to write out this, for example. And then there's things from Microsoft Graph, 7 in total. It's the calendars read write, and it's the calendars read write shared. So the calendars will only give access to this logged in user's calendar, but I also want to have access to the calendars that are shared with this user. Directory access as user all. So this is maybe superficial to this one, but I'm not sure, so I'm using both. This one is what is everything with SharePoint. So sites read all, and that doesn't mean that this user can read all sites. It just means that we are delegated to read all the sites that the user has access to. And also write. So this means that we could potentially create documents as being the user. But the most important is that we could read all the sites that the user has access to. And the user profile at SharePoint. So here we can probably get the user picture and things like that. I think one can click this and get more information about what's actually accessible here. This one I don't think we need, but I added it just for experimentation. So once I've what could happen is that the admin consent is required for some of these things, like this one. Access as user, admin consent is required. And then, since I'm the admin at this site, I can actually grant the admin consent for this organization, and then it shows up as granted. And what this means that I, as a developer, not being admin, could not just request all these access rights and hope that it would work. without getting the consent of the administrator of the site. So it's a bit cumbersome working in large organizations that you need to find who is it that actually is the admin for the Azure part of this UI. And I don't know if you can delegate it on a per application level. You probably can. So once we have done this, and we need a couple of important identifiers to tell our application so that we can integrate our application to actually use this on Azure. So we can see here on overview and on endpoints. So this is probably the best page to get access to all the endpoints. And I will blur this in the video because this is of course partly sensitive information. It's not sensitive in the way that you actually can run with it, but it's not necessarily to expose this for everyone, because if you would like to hack this organization, it would be easier if you know this information. You still need to get past the passwords and everything like that. So it's no biggie, but still for good measures, you shouldn't flash all these numbers around. So then we have the Auth 2.0 authorization endpoint, and this is what goes into our main OpenID Connect settings file. That's actually the turnkey settings. There are settings for this, and we can go to our wiki and search on OpenID and look on the OpenID config, and what we would need is all of these settings. And if I were to open up those in a notepad, I would need the client ID. Okay, what's the client ID then? That's the one that's over here. And then I would need the authority. Yeah, and that was the one that was over here. Actually, it's this one that just ends on version 2.0. That's the authority, and this is the authorization endpoint on this authority, and this is the token endpoint on that same authority. Actually, I'm wrong. It's this one. That's the authority, the one that points us to the well-known OpenID configuration thing. So that's the authority that we're looking for to put into here. And this is the redirect URI that should match one of the redirect URIs that we added to our authentication page, one of these. And then this one, the response type, we can leave that as suggested. We want code and ID token to be returned to us. This is just what the authorization first call should give us, and given the code, we are allowed to call it again to get further information for this user. And the app secret is something that we can define over here, let's see, certificates and secrets. So and we could add a new client secret. We can have as many as we want, and they are all identified by a unique number, which means absolutely nothing. It's this value that's important, and we need to remember that value after that we have created it, because we won't be able to get to it now. We need to create a new one if we forget it. So the client secret is just yet another way for ensuring that not someone else is trying to use our application registration. So that's the app secret, and then the token endpoint. That's actually back to the overview and the endpoints, and this is the token endpoint. That should go in here. And then the scope. Well, the scope tells OpenID Connect what we want, and we want OpenID, and we want the profile of the user that we are logging in as open with the strategy of OpenID. And we also want the offline access. Why is that? Well, the offline access is actually the way to instruct Azure AD to give us the refresh token. Without offline access in the scope, we will not get access to the refresh token. And if we don't have the refresh token, we can't really get the access token after the initial 50 minutes or the hour when it goes out of freshness and gets stale. And then it won't work. And if it doesn't work and we don't have the refresh token, well, we're pretty much obligated to notify the user to log out and to log in again to get a fresh access token. So we want to avoid that. That's why we want the refresh token. Yeah, and also this one should be on a row on its own. The shared secret, that's where the secret goes that I told you about just a minute ago. So these are the settings. Once we have these for this particular organization, we can use functions available to us to log in and to get to this UI to search for documents. Of course, how do we get to get access to this information then? Well, it's the same way that I've shown you earlier, that we go here and go to the asset TK sync, and then we probably need to re-download the components from GitHub, and once that is done, we will see that we have the GraphAPI 2023 model in here, so we could merge this model into our existing model, and that's good, but we also need to get all these settings from these settings into our server somehow. So how do we do that? Well, we do that by adding these settings to a turnkey settings file, and as it's set up here, I should probably just change this while I'm at it, because I saw an issue. OpenID config, and I'm gonna go to edit, turnkey settings override XML. And so the turnkey settings override XML is yet another way to get data, to provide these settings. So I'm gonna go to this page where this is explained, and here is a section on turnkey settings override. So from today we also we allow for a turnkey settings override XML that will be read after the turnkey settings XML file is read. Use case for this is, for example, to add your GraphAPI OpenID config settings in this file, since this file will not be overwritten when you refresh your turnkey installation. So what I mean is that there is a turnkey settings file that will be overwritten when I refresh my turnkey installation. And I can find that settings by going to this folder, just opening that in File Explorer and going to, so this is where the server resides. I'm gonna go to App Data, and here I see that there is a turnkey settings XML file, but I've added a turnkey settings override, and that will be left alone even when I refresh the server. So settings I have invested in and put here will be mine. So I can open that with Notepad++, and let's see what I got. So, and here I've put for one organization and for another one, and these are commented out, and these are the settings for this organization, and these are actually shared, and I have two. One is commented out, so this is the one that I will use whenever I want to run on IIS and HTTP, use HTTPS and a certificate, and this is the one that I use for the turnkey core running locally on the localhost 5020. So if you have another port, no worries, just remember to update the port in Azure to allow this one as a redirect URL for you. I then have added also skip external account confirmation screen, because it doesn't make much sense. When you're logging in for an organization, you should probably use the email from that organization, not provide your another one. And hide the password login, because once you want to log in as an organization, you probably don't want people walking off the street and just creating their own accounts, even if you can. This one, the shared secret, that's the key that we will use to encrypt the sys token, access token, and the refresh token. So you should create that of your own and have your own, and not share it outside your organization, and not share, don't share it with anyone that isn't admin of your system. Of course, most people won't have access to the database, but you know how these things goes, and there might be some breach somewhere where the backup is stored, and all of a sudden they have access to a lot of stuff, and then this is your friend, because it will be really hard to get to the refresh token if they don't have this key. Good, so that shouldn't be stored, and that's also the reason that we didn't make this key part of the model. That had all of these settings could theoretically have been made part of the model, but that sort of has security implications that we want to avoid. Good, and I will finish up here, and hope that you could try this out to integrate documents into your applications. And of course you will need to figure out what the use cases are for you, but I'm sure you will manage that. Otherwise we will come back and talk more about that on a later date. Thank you for listening.